Welcome back, everybody, to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm Jameson Cable, and with me is Mr. Daniel Hopkins. How you doing?
Doing good, Jameson. Excited for today's episode.
Yes, we are going to wrap up the Ashland Tragedy. Again, I'll remind everybody, you can get the book by Joe Castle. It's got way more details than we're talking about. We are very much just skimming the surface. And he's going to come on the show hopefully next week and talk about the book a bit more. And if you have any questions, let me know, and we will ask him those questions and get more information, that all the information we can get from him, I guess. But anyway, we'll wrap up. We'll summarize what's happened quickly. There was a fire in Ashland. 3 kids, and I say kids, I mean, I guess I should say teenagers, were killed. Fanny and Robert Gibbons were brothers and sisters. They were killed, and Emma Carrico were killed in a house fire. But it comes out that it was not a house fire. It was actually arson, and the 2 girls had been raped, and Robert had been, basically murdered. Well, they all but 3 murdered. And it comes out that originally they thought that the father, John Gibbons, was to blame, but that was debunked. And then George Ellis came forward and made his confession. And he confessed that him, Ellis Craft, and William Neal all 3 committed this crime and so forth. George Ellis, however, was not he did not murder them or rape them. He just was the accomplice, I guess, if you could say it that way. But they all had trials. They all had been sentenced to death by hanging. However, George Ellis was not sentenced to death by hanging. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. And that did not go well with the people of Ashland. And a mob came, got George Ellis out of jail, and took him back to Ashland and hung him for his involvement. That's where we left off last episode. Pretty good summary, would you say?
Yeah, I think you hit all the relevant points.
Yeah. And if you want to hear more, go back and listen to those episodes.
Or read the book.
Yeah, or read the book. There you go. So we're jumping right back into it because this episode is titled Tragedies in Ashland, because things take another turn. That when I was reading this book, man, I was just blown away when I got to this point. I was reading about this. When the news of Ellis's death is found out by Kraft and Neal, they began to really reaffirm that they are innocent, because you think the main person that they had to, I guess, the main hurdle they had to get over was George Ellis's confession, but now he's gone. So who is there to even talk to or contradict what they are saying? You know, that person is now dead. So with some legal procedures, Kraft and Neal, they actually get a new trial, and they're granted by the Court of Appeals. The date had not been set, and of course, unrest in the community or Ashland just begins to spread like wildfire. On the 23rd of October, the circuit court was in session, and Kraft and Neal were ordered to come back to Catlettsburg. They were accompanied by 5 companies of state militia and 1 piece of artillery. This seems kind of like a lot to protect these 2 guys, but the fear of a mob rule is very high, and especially with George Ellis's being hung by the mob as well. You know, the tension is just to a boiling point. So the governor of Kentucky at the time said the following: to support the dignity of law, if the whole county of Boyd had to be killed in protecting the prisoners, he would. So what he's saying right there is that, you know, they're going to have, they might have to kill all of these mob members, this gang, this group of people that could potentially, because his responsibility is to protect the prisoners. His statement here is probably accurate. Now, that doesn't make it good,
right? Good. That's not what the people want to hear. I think what he's saying here is that when someone's put in prison, it is the responsibility of the government to protect them. You know, this person they've been afforded their trial, which is a constitutional guarantee. They've been found guilty, which was done legally, and they are imprisoned, which is the required punishment for those people. Well, if you are going to allow the citizens to just roam free and hang them and kill them and all that, why put him in jail? Just turn him loose and say, good luck, hope it works out. And so what the governor is saying here is it's our responsibility to protect them. We're going to send 5 companies of militia or whatever you just said there with it. But it sounds pretty bad to use the exact term. If we have to kill all the people in Boyle County to protect him, it's like, well, wait a minute. We're protecting this guy because he killed 3 people in Boyd County. So that's one of those statements by the governor that has some legal backing, but doesn't go, probably is not going to go a long way toward winning re-election. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, and that's pretty well put, because maybe the correct statement, but he could have probably just said, "Hey, we will uphold the law, and protect these prisoners until they're proven guilty." He could have said like that, but he also had some other baggage, and we can talk about him later as far as that goes. But he was known as the lenient Luke, and he was involved in the Civil War. He was not much liked as governor, but again, that's kind of a different story for a different day. So Kraft and Neal were put in an upstairs room of the courthouse while the 5 companies of the soldiers occupied the town. People began to come to Catlettsburg, of course. John Gibbons was not permitted in the courtroom at all, which if you would think, John Gibbons, probably a good idea he wasn't allowed in there, because, I mean, these people killed his kids, and he was accused for that at a time. So that's kind of a double issue there, So the two criminals were brought into court, which fell silent as they came in, and the case was heard to change the venue. The trial was moved to Carter County, and the prisoners would be taken back to Lexington. Now, before I say anything else, you think this went well? This made people happy?
I'm gonna guess no.
No, it did not. Again, the people of Ashland and Boyd County said they need to be tried here. They committed the crime here, which you can get into the fair trial and all this kind of stuff. Jurors already having opinions or whatever, all that process, selecting jurors, I guess.
Jurors as members of the mob, all of those potential downfalls.
Yeah, but at this point, everybody in the state, even probably the nation, know about this, and they already. I mean, I can understand the people of Boyd County. Just try them here, man. These guys are guilty. Let's do it here. But anyway, this again makes people upset. Rumors grow into reality. Around 200 men and boys from Ashland came on train and unloaded in Catlettsburg. Now, to get into the military side of this, the Major John R. Allen was in charge, and his men had planned on returning with the prisoners by the train, but those plans changed, and they headed to the Garnet State Steamboat. A group of men from the mob approached Allen and his men, and they demanded the prisoners be surrendered. Allen refused. Allen did say that he would fight to the last man rather than give up the murderers, which is a unique statement to kind of say.
It's a complete opposite of the jail guard who let them come in, and George Ellis, who basically said, "Here's the keys." But I think you see a difference here in a single jail guard in the initial story from the previous podcast, and then this one, which this is the military. And, if you give up, that this is we think about World War II and the Civil War and missions, but this is a military mission. Their responsibility is to protect these prisoners. If you give them up, you're in violation of your military orders. I mean, you may get dishonorably discharged, or could be even at that time, and maybe some kind of execution or something for you. So, he's doing his job, and probably with a little more stability than the local jail guard as well.
So this is where we get to, and I'll try to be as clear as I can. If it doesn't make sense to you, Daniel, let me know, because then it probably doesn't make sense to the audience either. So Allen and his men and the prisoners, they load up on the Garnet State, and they embark on their return. The word travels fast that the steamboat would be passing through Ashland, or by Ashland on the river. People flocked to the front street and to the riverbank to catch a glimpse of the passing boat, which is very common for the times. People want to just see. You go to the train station just to see who gets off the train. There's no real reason. People, most of these people were women and children. Just wanting to be a part and see the boat going by with the prisoners. The group that was at Catlettsburg, so the mob that was at Catlettsburg, they load back up on the train to return to Ashland. Now they get there to Ashland about the same time the boat is getting to Ashland. Now that boat is not going to stop at Ashland. It's going, taking the prisoners on. But as the boat comes into sight, a group of men and boys, they jump on a ferry boat and ordered the driver to head out. They head toward the Garnet State, and then silence falls across the scene. And then a shot is heard, and fire then rains down from the Garnet State. The crowd on the bank had little time to react. About 1,500 shots were fired, and people just fell over dead, injured. Just chaos ensues. Even a cow is killed. But within minutes, the Garnet State was out of sight, and only dead bodies laid on the banks of Ashland. Pretty wild scene.
Wow.
Let me see. I got something I want to read here. Look at that. I'm going to read the official report written to Governor Blackburn. At 12:00 p.m. on November 1st, our command marched to the riverfront at Catlettsburg to wait the arrival of a boat to convey us home. We marched the prisoners, Neal and Kraft, with two companies as guards into the wharf boat, and left the remaining companies at the top of the hill to repulse an attack which we anticipated from the Ashland mob. A few minutes after, we took our position, a train of cars consisting of one locomotive, one passenger, and 5 flat cars, closely packed with a mob from Ashland, Kentucky, arrived. A delegation from the mob waited on me and demanded the prisoners, Neal and Kraft, threatening that if we did not surrender them peaceably, they would use force. Their demand was refused. They then informed us that they would attack us as our boat passed Ashland with a force of at least 2,000 men, supported by a ferry boat with a battery of 4 pieces of artillery. We then withdrew to our boat, the Garnet State, and started down the river. The mob at the same time took their train and headed toward Ashland. The train ran along the riverbank about a mile at the same speed as our boat, and just before leaving the river, opened fire on us. But our troops, with great coolness and self-restraint, did not fire, although the bullets of the mob struck in the water all about the boat. As we got nearly opposite Ashland, a ferry boat, closely packed with armed men, left the shore and headed toward us. They hailed us and signaled for us to stop. As we paid no attention to their signals, they commenced firing on us with rapidity. After they had fired 2 or 3 volleys and had wounded 2 of our men, the order was given for our troops to fire, which they did, and a very spirited engagement ensued, in which the mob was badly crippled. Though our cannon was on deck and finally handled by Lieutenant Bly and his men, I did not deem it necessary to fire it, as our infantry were sufficient to repulse the attack. We had 5 men wounded or hurt in the engagement, but none seriously. The troops acted with admirable bravery, coolness, and self-possession. We will reach Lexington this morning at 9 a.m. John R. Allen, Major Commanding. So that is the official report that Allen sent to the governor after this happened. He did admit that they fired for too long, but did not condone his own actions because Charles Bligh wanted to shoot the train with a cannon. He placed all the blame on the citizens, saying that they shouldn't have gathered on the they shouldn't have gathered on the bank. But Major Allen was actually quite young and inexperienced. He placed all the blame on the vile people from Eastern Kentucky. Of course, the big question is, who shot first? Many, including the sheriff of Boyd County, stated that he did not see a shot fire from the banks. Statements from multiple people on the bank actually confirmed that they heard no shots from the shore or the ferry boat, which, remember, as the boat was coming by, the people on the train were just getting off. There wasn't a lot of time for them to kind of arm up, and a lot of the people that were shot and wounded and died were women and children, some older people. Quite crazy when you really step back. One of those situations where a little bit of coolness, as even old Allen says, would probably have been better off. So, thoughts?
I don't know. It's definitely sort of a chaotic scene. I don't really know what to think about it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
I know that's not what you wanted to hear,
but that's it, though, man.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, whenever I was reading it, I was like, oh my goodness! I was like, what is going on? But the whole incident, happens very quickly, and again, I'm not going to go into all the accounts that are given that that happened or that that from the people on the bank, because people were just getting shot. Dying, and people are frantic trying to find help. Back then, your doctor is one guy, down the road.
Right.
There's not like there's a hospital just full of doctors and nurses waiting for a big event like this. A lot of people ended up dying just because there wasn't enough care to happen people to take care of them. It just paints a terrible scene. Women and children died, of course. Men died as well. But as you read on, it just seems like it was ill timing by Allen, and whether or not they, and it almost seems like Allen and them were just wanting that confrontation to fire, or that one thing to say, let's fire on them. What's it called? When you're thinking of something that you're wanting to do,
like a preconception, I guess.
Preconception, yeah, they had that preconception maybe that these people are violent. If they fire upon us, we're gonna rain down. We're gonna take care of them. But anyway.
Well, too, this is a topic that has sort of always stayed in the news about police and protection, but the potential issues that can arise, from that. And we've seen it in Kentucky here in recent years, but in other places around the country about, police departments, did they shoot where should they not have it? And it's a difficult thing because everybody's human. And you're right with the word preconceived ideas. If you go into a place thinking these people are bad, these people are going to kill me, then your finger might be a little bit quicker on the trigger than if you're going into something that's not the same. And it just shows those are the same issues that still arise today. And I think you're right about Allen, though. It seems like they're almost primed for a fight of some kind here from the get-go. But it makes sense in a way because the people of Ashland have not really shown themselves to be casual, well, let's just see how it plays out kind of citizens in this whole story either. So,
well, so I'm going to read you a few little testimonies from some people. So this is from the sheriff, John. It's Koun, Cones or
KO, probably Coon.
Coon.
Yeah.
Okay, so and this is his testimony about the whole ordeal. I'm the sheriff of Boyd County. I was on the Granite. I think I've called it Garnet this whole time, but it's the Granite. Granite State last Wednesday when the boat passed Ashland. I would suppose the firing continued about 2 minutes. I saw no firing from the shore. Those near me seemed to fire at the ferry boat. I do not know how many shots were fired from the ferry or wharf boat. Major Allen was in front of cabin. I heard no order given to fire. I was somewhat excited. I heard no order to cease firing. I went into the cabin when the firing commenced and stayed there. So this was somebody that was on the boat but heard no shots from the shore. Another one. This person is would have been on the John Nist, N-I-S-T, Nist.
Uh-huh.
I was standing on the ferry boat at first. I left it and went to the wharf boat. There were 18 on the wharf boat, boys and men. I saw but few armed, nothing that could reach the boat. So saying that the guns that they had on the boat wouldn't have even hit the Granite State. Could reach the boat. 2 shots were then fired from the wharf boat. A man on the hurricane deck of the Granite State with shoulder straps rose and fired. Then 2 shots from the ferry and the disabling volley from the steamer. There was no firing from the grade. I don't really know what they mean by grade, but anyway, there's a lot more. I mean, there's about 10 or so different accounts here of people that were in the area, and I'll read one more from Captain J.C. Witten. I saw the ferry start out about the time the Granite State was passing. About the time she had straightened, 2 shots were fired from the wharf boat. Then the firing commenced from the steamer. I could not hear any shots from the ferry. The man on the boil deck fired at the ferry. Those lying on their faces behind the skylight in the hurricane deck fired at the people on the top of the bank. Shooting from that position, their guns were elevated and wild in shooting. There was no hostile demonstration on the shore. So, one of those situations that it seems like a lot of people died that didn't have to die, kind of stinks. Well, it's kind of a tragedy. That's the other end of this tragedy. That's why I labeled this episode "Tragedies in Ashland."
So, what will be the total head count of people killed in this whole? Let's just use the word situation. Like if you from start to finish, I mean, we're looking at a sizable number of deaths here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I put you on the spot there to do math here. You have to get the tallies. But I mean, this city of Ashland is not. I mean, this is not New York. This isn't Chicago. I mean, it's a relatively small town. Like this is something that by the time you calculate all the people affected here, it's going to hit almost everybody in the community. So there's going to be hard feelings, and there's going to be, sadness and troubles and whatever terms you want to use for a long time after the fact here.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. That might be one that we might need to ask Joe, because I cannot remember reading that anywhere in the book, like a total of how many people died on the riverbank.
Yeah.
Because you already have the 3 teenagers who originally were died.
Right.
We're going to get into the
executions.
The executions here in a minute. If no spoiler there, I guess. And then other people on the bank as well. Those people. I mean, it's numerous. There's a lot.
Yeah, well, it's probably 10 to 15 at least, and maybe more.
So you're talking about the size of Ashland. Everybody is going to be touched in some sort of way by this, one way or the other. So many were dead and wounded on the banks. but this kind of moved things on a little bit. The people of Ashland kind of had to pick themselves up and find that guilty punishment that they wanted, in the first place. But no charges were ever given to Major Allen or his men on their actions. Allen was actually promoted to colonel for all this, and that's pretty much his role in the story. I mean, there's a lot more about him in the book, but we'll go on back to the trials. 500 soldiers were sent with Kraft and Neal to Grayson, which is in Carter County, which is real close to Ashland and all that, to protect them. The weather delayed the trial of Ellis Craft, but once it began, a lot of the same witnesses were called, and a chilling feeling what came over when Caroline Thomas, the mother of Emma Carrico, was called to the stand, and a painful and dramatic scene occurred when Ellis Craft was asked to speak. Miss Gibbons couldn't take it anymore and shouted out to be removed from the court. So you have the mothers of these children having to endure these trials again, and being there, just heart-wrenching as well. Ellis Craft was found guilty, and on October 12th at 1:15, the floor was let out from his feet, and he was hanged. But I do want to read Craft's statements at the end or before he is hanged. And if you remember, I read some of them at the very beginning, but I'm going to read them all because they're quite telling and really, really, well, it's interesting to hear them from a man who's he's about to die. Dear friends, you all know why I'm here, and I know that all of you have wished to hear what I have to say. I have been charged with a crime for which I am innocent. Now you all know this is not the time or place to tell a lie. I've said before, and I say again, you might as well hang a newborn babe, for I am as innocent of this crime as the babe. I was not at the Gibbons house the night that awful crime was committed. Would that I was, for if I were, those precious girls would be alive today. I loved those children dearly, and would never have thought to harm a hair on their heads. And now, as I am about to swing between the heavens and earth, I'll tell you what I think caused my death. False witnesses and men like Mr. Heflin, Mr. Campbell, and Mr. Russell have desired to see me hang. But I believe that one day God, in his great power and mercy, will see to it that the guilty one will be hung. I'd like to thank Mr. Tyree for showing kindness to me while I've been in his jail, and all the good people of Carter County for their kindness. I only wish the opportunity to repay you with more than just words. Folks, I know it's too late for me, but friends, don't forget poor brother Neal. For if justice was done, he had never been separated from his dear wife and their little children. And if justice was done, I'd still be home with my mother and father. I call upon all you mothers and fathers to teach your children right from wrong, like my dear mother and father did for me. I have a good father and mother who raised me right. I stand here before all of you and by God and declare that I am innocent of murdering those children. And I hope the Gibbonses and Thomases can find a way to forgive me for something that others have done. He then begins to sing a hymn. Did Christ, O sinners, weep, and shall our cheeks be dry? Let floods of potential grief burst forth from every eye. The Son of God in tears, the wondering angels see. Be thou astonished, O my soul, he shed those tears for thee. He wept that we might weep, each sin demands a tear. In heaven alone no sin is found, and there's no weeping there. And then he was hung. So, pretty compelling statements, I must say. We'll go on and jump into Neal's trial real quick, and then we'll have open discussion. So during Neal's trial, Martha Gibbons was called to the stand and was asked if she ever saw her children after she returned to Ashland, which seems like a terrible question to ask. She breaks down in tears, the jury begins to cry, and the counsel didn't ask any more questions. The trial was basically a repeat, and after a postponement on Friday, March 27th, 1885, almost 4 years have gone, more than 3 years after the incident. Neil was taken to the gallows, was also hung. But he had a final statement as well. This is no place to tell a lie. I am not guilty of the heinous crime of which I stand convicted. Someday my innocence will be established. I bid you one and all farewell. That was it. Then he hung. So
this was not as thorough or in depth as the previous one.
No, it was not. It was not. So, man, were they innocent or not?
I don't know. I don't really. I mean, there's so many twists and turns in the story. It's hard to keep. Like every time you feel like, oh, yeah, we got this, then it feels like it takes another turn in what happened. I do think the story the mob part, the breaking into the jail part, the riverbank part probably does put a lot of like extra onto what may have been, I don't want to say cut and dried, but it adds so much. There's so much peripheral in this case. It's hard to really, the mob on the riverbank doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But that's a big part of the story, and, if you go back to, you go back just to the first episode that we had, you had the two different detectives that came in, that sort of swooped in to maybe investigate and see what happens. And, they came with sort of different perspectives. I don't know if you can accurately answer the question.
I'm gonna say they're guilty, but I also want to read one more thing that might put more perspective on things. So Daniel K. Wise, he was the attorney for George Ellis at his trial for murder. And after he made public a conversation that he had with Ellis. So if we're, just to remind, George Ellis was the one who first came forward. And this is what he had said. Before Neil or Kraft had been tried, we had frequently consultations with Ellis, and we particular to impress it upon his mind that by his confession he had virtually fastened the rope around his own neck and sealed his own doom. And we warned him of his awful situation and told him not to add another horror to his crime by accusing Neil and Kraft of a most horrible crime if they were innocent. In these interviews, with the warning before him, he, as in Ellis, always said that Neil and Kraft were guilty as he had charged them. Afterwards, in the presence of Major Brazy, whose friendship for his family in West Virginia induced him to come to Boyd County as a volunteer counsel, Ellis was warned by Major Brazy and myself of the terrible crime he would commit if he swore away the lives of Neil and Kraft. He again reaffirmed as true what he had stated before, that Neil and Kraft were equally or more guilty than himself. So it's a tough one, but I kind of feel like they were guilty. Ellis Kraft, if you read the book, you'll find out more. He was a bit more of troublemaker. He'd been in trouble before. He'd been arrested before. He had a lot of issues prior, and the fact that like even on the gallows, he's proclaiming his innocence for all those other crimes he committed. He proclaimed his innocence, like that no part. And the kind of I get kind of this hypocrisy sentiment when he's up there on the stage. My mother and father told me what was right and wrong, raised me for what was right and wrong, and everybody should do that as well. And then here he is. Neil is a bit more of the silent guy, I think, of the whole crew. Not as much is said about him, or he's not as vocal. He hadn't been in any other kind of trouble. I kind of feel like George Ellis, was He might have been more involved than he let on, but I don't know. I don't, of course, know. I wasn't there. No, won't ever know. But I don't see any motive for George Ellis to make it up. Whenever I look at it, there's no motive for him to make it up. So unless his conscience is guilty, I mean, unless he did it single-handedly, and he's just wanting to bring some people down, if he had some kind of ill will towards Neil and Kraft, but none of that. I don't know any of that. So with the evidence at hand, I see him as guilty.
I tend to agree with you on that. It's like you said, once you kind of wade through all the outside chaos that went along with the case, it does seem like it's that they were guilty in this.
Yeah.
Horrible situation.
Crazy. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, horrible, crazy, and sort of never really stopped. Like if it was just the crime, how bad that is. But then, the other, then the houses are burned, and then the mob with the crowd and the shooting. It's like it was just a snowball of bad things.
Yeah, pretty crazy event. And I mean, you hear a lot about vigilante justice, in Kentucky for sure during this time, and those issues are probably worth talking about as well. But this was one when I got in touch with Joe and he sent the book. And I would be reading the book, and then I would send him a message like, "Oh my goodness, this just happened! I can't. This is so I can't believe it." And he actually wrote me back and said, "What chapter are you on?" And I told him what chapter. He said, "Oh, keep reading. You're not even to the next. You're not even to chapter 12 or whatever it was." And then I got to chapter 12, and that was the river boat. And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Or the river bank, I guess, massacre or whatever you want to call it. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is just." I couldn't believe it, but a very compelling story. If you want to dig deeper, get the book. Like I said, we'll have Joe on next week, hopefully, and to talk about the book and all that. Any final thoughts?
No, it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. It's been a very unique, very different story. And I think it's definitely one that the book would be worth picking up.
Yes, I very much encourage you to do it. And again, if nothing else, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.